And thank you to all of the ASRA members that are attending as well. We are just thrilled to have an opportunity to showcase who we are, what we do. Just so the members on the call know, we have had a few conversations with Mary over recent months, and a lot of those conversations have been around data and making sure that the industry has access to quality insights and granular insights on your estates, and the fact that that can sometimes be expensive, sometimes quite an arduous task. So myself and Jonathan today will take you through how Utopi have simplified everything when it comes to data and how proud we are of what we do, so that you guys can concentrate on making, comfortable living environments for your residents and ultimately creating really memorable experiences for them. So just so you know, we will be bringing the data to life. I'll be taking you through some data stories at the end of the session from UK student accommodation, and then we'll also have a Q&A. But yeah, just wanted to say off the bat, thank you very much, Mary, and I'll hand over to Jonathan now to cover the agenda.
Thank you, Chanel, and don't forget to tell me when you want your slides moving on.
Yes.
So stay tuned up. So I'm a bit new to Zoom because I'm very experienced in the team. So bear with me in the fact I'm sharing my full screen. Please ignore all the nonsense and irrelevant stuff at the top. I'll focus on the content of the slides. So first of all, just to repeat what Chanel says, we're really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you today. We are really proud of the business that we operate in, not just because of its business metrics, but because of the impact it has in supporting students and other residents live their lives well, but also in the environmental impact that we're able to facilitate in the services that we provide. So in this presentation, Chanel and I, ably supported by Stuart and Falk, who you also see on there. Falk is our CTO, and he leads all our product development and the innovation aspects, which we'll pick up in this presentation, how we use the data that we've gathered from the services we provide to continually improve services. And Stuart is head of our impact team. So one of the things that is different about Utopi is we don't just give you data, we give you data in a format on a platform that I'll cover that allows you to understand the performance of your assets, identify actionable insights, which is great. But if you don't know what to do with those insights and speak to someone with experience of having seen things before and helped address them, that's where Stuart and his team comes in to really help you use the platform that we'll talk about. We want to talk today about how we help our clients in the higher education sector, and we'll explain to you how our solution works, both in the hardware and the platform and the data we provide. And then ultimately, we'll give you real examples of real impacts that we've delivered. Mine will be a bit granular and a bit dry. Chanel's will tell you some of the more exciting, quirky, eccentric things perhaps that we've found from the data. So first and foremost, Utopi is a data company. We help our clients balance student experience with managing energy consumption, and that's really important in terms of making sure that student resident satisfaction is maintained whilst you are addressing your energy consumption. So it's not a crude solution, it's actually an intentional and intelligent solution that Utopi is able to provide. How we do it in a sustainable manner, and not just in the savings we deliver, but in making sure we make that positive impact on the environment. So when you've changed your settings on your system, we're all used to going back and find out there's been creep in it or someone's changed something. Utopi is a live platform that allows all our clients to be able to see that as well. And we'll also talk a bit about the hardware we deploy to generate that data, which leads us to our business as a SaaS model. But what we're really about is we learn every day. And that's one of the things that excites me about Utopi. It's one of the things that our clients are really focused on, because we have those data points and we invest in analysing that data to determine what else we can find out about building performance that is useful to our clients. And again, we'll bring that to life today. So Chanel, if I hand to you, quick intro on us.
Yes, so I am head of marketing at Utopi. I've proudly been with the company for just about 3 years. So I've been a part of the huge growth story that we've had. And I always say marketing can be quite hard if you don't believe in the product that you're marketing or the people that you're marketing. And I feel really lucky that I believe in what we do. I love what we do, and I love the people that we work with. So yeah, really, really pleased to be here today. And as Jonathan says, I'll take you through some mind-boggling data stories that hopefully you'll get something from.
Okay, thank you. And I'm Jonathan. I'm Chief Revenue Officer for Utopi. Alongside Folk, I sit on the exec. So as well as being responsible for our growth trajectory, I also have the pleasure of being helping to run the business overall. My personal background is in service transformation and delivering new service models, but I have always been, well, the last 10 years, been active in the education sector in those previous roles, having worked with the DFE, the Student Loans Company, on a very large national contract, schools, colleges, universities and charities. And I'm in fact a trustee of a large UK educational charity myself. So a bit like Chanel, I'm proud to work in the education sector to look at how we can help students live their lives well and achieve their education potential. The impact of the built environment and the environment they live in does affect that, and so that's something that I'm genuinely interested in, and Utopi fits to that.
Great. So we thought we'd kick off with a little bit about Utopi and where we've come from. So Utopi was founded in 2019 by 4 of our brilliant co-founders, and each of our co-founders had a really deep expertise of scaling businesses. So since 2019, even with an unprecedented global pandemic in year one, we've grown Utopi to be the market-leading ESG data platform for the built environment. So as Jonathan said, we are a data business. We are also a technology business, but more importantly, we're a purpose-driven business. So we're now live in over 78,000 beds across 13 countries, and we've got over 110,000. In fact, I think it just went to over 112,000 active devices, and they're generating data every hour, every day. So to us, those aren't just abstract numbers. They represent the actionable insights that we're empowering our clients with, and that gives them the opportunity to reduce their costs, streamline operations, decarbonize their assets is a big one, but also build really comfortable, healthy environments for their residents. What's important about Utopi is we don't just collect that data either. We translate that into clarity and confidence for our clients. And as Jonathan said, we now have 38 billion environmental data points, or actually we're about to be 39 billion, and that will be mentioned a lot on today's call. But the key thing about that is that we are learning more every day from that data about your assets, about how people are living in those buildings, about how people are operating and managing those buildings. We're able to spot trends, whether that be across asset classes, heating types, you name it, set really informed industry benchmarks. And as an innovative business, we're also able to develop solutions that make your life easier.
Thank you, Chanel. So in terms of just picking up our growth, in March 2025, we had 49,000 units or beds. Today, we have 79,000. So that growth is maintaining since 2019. And we're at the stage where it is also accelerating. And you'll see on this slide here, we are trusted by a large number of operators and investors in the student accommodation sector. They are largely private sector organisations. And we recently, this year, we secured contracts with IQ, just over 2,000 beds, 7,000 beds with Greystar. Hudson, we secured just before Christmas, Hudson Lone Star, that's another 4,000 beds. So we are trusted by student accommodation providers to help them with their energy control and reduce their environmental footprint going forward. We're conscious on that slide, there aren't very many names of universities. This is accommodation that's provided to universities on behalf of private sector providers. But we're really keen to move the proposition and the evidence that we've got directly into university accommodation provided by universities. There's an awful lot of commonalities between the two estates, but there's also some important differences that we need to recognise. So often the university estate will be older than private sector investor-driven estate. Utopi is a retrofit solution that we're able to put into assets. So the age of the building just presents an additional set of slightly different problems we know our technology can support with, but our approach as a business is to understand those differences and flex our solution to deal with it rather than to take a one-size-fits-all solution. We also have a footprint in co-living and build to rent, but our primary sector is student accommodation, and that's largely because of the all-inclusive rent model. So in terms of the benefits we provide in cost reduction, and particularly, we're able to give those benefits to the people who operate or own those assets because of that all-inclusive accommodation model. That becomes more difficult in co-living and build to rent, but there are some examples in co-living where there is an all-inclusive model. And so that's a sector that we operate in. You'll also see the names of some non-providers in there. We've got great relationships across the sector with GRES, Fitwell, organisations like DeepKey, Lavanda, who are a project management software, because it's important that we operate as part of an ecosystem rather than operate in isolation. So having those partnerships that allow us to understand the whole performance of the building, but also leverage those relationships to the benefit of our clients is something that we try and do as well. So why us? This slide summarises the benefits that we can provide to student accommodation. When we benchmark ourselves against our competitors, there aren't any exactly the same as us, but like in everything, there are other organisations that are similar to what we do. We are lower cost in our capex. We know that. That's partly because we're a SaaS business, so we generate our growth and our revenue around ARR. But that's because we provide a service for that ARR, and you maintain access to the platform. We can take action without engagement. We can automate an awful lot of the control that's applied to heating systems in assets. So unless there's an anomaly, I won't steal Chanel's thunder later on some of the vagaries that we find. We can create a regime of temperature management in the assets that does not require any intervention directly into the room or at the asset. It can all be done on the platform level. It does require engagement with your teams to make sure that the regime and the timing and the temperature ranges we apply works for your students. So there's engagement with the operational facilities management team, but there's no need to engage or go into the rooms unless there's something that we find that you might want to go and have a look at. And as I say, I'll leave those examples to Chanel. Data-driven insights it's what we're about as a business. They are actionable insights. There's an awful lot of things that we can see. What's really important is providing examples of things where action can be taken to realise benefits. And so that is a key part, and that's how we design the platform going forward. We've already mentioned how we reduce costs. That's in creating the environment of temperature control and identifying things like occupied and unoccupied with step down that allows you to expend money on energy when you need to spend it at a level you need to spend it at, as opposed to fixing it at a constant level that's on all of the time. Chanel.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. So what does that mean for ASRA? What does that mean for those of you on the call? What's important to know is we at Utopi don't ever want to just innovate for the sake of it. We want to innovate to solve problems. So what we've been doing over the last 12 months is having lots of conversations with the higher education sector and understand exactly where those main pain points are for you. We know that data can be a solution, but it's important that that data is centered around what you need. So these 5 areas continue to come up in our conversations, and thankfully we feel that there are 5 core areas that Utopi can add a huge amount of value. So number 1 is cost control. It's winter, it's cold, these are aging estates, utility bills aren't getting any cheaper. So Utopi can offer you that granular room level insight to help you understand where there might be energy waste, where there might be cost saving opportunities, and help make what's quite large, complex data quite simple. Then student engagement. We're really strong believers in engaging your residents and educating them and bringing them along on that environmental journey with you. We also believe in putting data in the hands of residents, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. But again, access to that granular insight will help you uncover opportunities here. Consumption insights, so getting visibility, whether that be electricity, gas, water, you name it. Again, the data stories later today will go into that in a little bit more detail. Asset performance. This is a really interesting one. Again, when you've got that granular room level insights, how much you can uncover that's going on in your estates. We're doing a lot of work, a lot of analysis at the moment for clients on occupancy, on the use of amenity spaces. It can go well beyond just energy consumption. It can also help you understand where to deploy capital, and especially in the context of our benchmarks, what assets, I guess, how they're comparing to industry averages. And then last but definitely not least, net zero. A lot of the estates that are going to be here during net zero already exist. So it's about refurbishing, retrofitting so that they can meet those further future expectations. And even our technology has been innovated with that in mind. Shout out to Falk here because he is on the call, but even our multi-sensor can be installed in as fast as 5 minutes. So thankfully, we're very retrofit friendly.
Thank you, Chanel. So we should probably tell you a little bit more about how we do it. I think we've identified the impact that we can have. So ultimately, this slide speaks for itself. As a SaaS provider, we provide our clients with access to data in a way that adds value to their operations. And this is a key part of what Stuart's team does. We also enable them to report on environmental performance as well as operational performance, which assists with ESG reporting. And Utopi contributes to BREEAM credits, for example, because of the granularity and the transparency we're able to give around energy performance. So the platform services data regarding meter consumption, carbon intensity, recognizing the geographic variations that exist within that in terms of the energy source, ambient space data such as temperature, CO2, humidity, and noise. And it also control of devices that manage temperature and can access other devices through the IoT. And from those data points, we're able to understand what's actually happening within the rooms in terms of is it occupied, is it unoccupied, in terms of overlay, has a window been opened to cool a room, for example. That's all done through predictive analytics based on the data that we have. And one of the ways it comes to life is really the platform can then feed into what we call a heat map. So room by room, you'll be able to tell the temperature of the bedroom, which then allows us to look at outliers, and on those outliers start to understand what's going on that could be addressed within that room. And also we have a logbook, so we're able to provide. One of the things I find with platforms is they're great, but they're always a moment in time. So with the logbook, we're able to help you capture the history of the assets, which is useful to you in terms of internal audit, but also exploring capital expenditure going forward. So we do it through three things, really. As we've already mentioned, our data analytics underpinned by a reporting platform, smart devices. And one of the things that Falk does is he's always looking at devices that are out there that we can connect to that will help us manage the temperature environment, the energy consumption environment of the room. In that slide there, you see something that's called a smart TRV, thermostatic radiator valve in the middle. That can be attached to a gas heated system radiator, which we can then control from the platform to manage the temperature of the room. The one at the back is a smart panel heater, which probably all familiar with, the same, but for an electrically heated asset. And we're also able to install the front device, which is panel sync, which is if you've already got a heater and it's compatible and it's not smart, we're able to install a device should you not wish to replace that heater, which will allow us to control the temperature of other devices that you have in your room. So we call them dumb panel heaters, which is a bit rude, and I apologize to them for it. But we turn a dumb panel heater into a smart panel heater. And then we do it alongside resident and also operational and facilities management engagement solutions. It's really important that people understand how to use the technology, what's different about, because we can retrofit. The day that we fit our devices and the multi-sensor is the day that the system starts to operate differently than it did the day before. So it's really important that we engage with students, we engage with our customers to make sure that they understand what's going to be different and how to make the best of it. So that's done through platforms, but also direct engagement that Stuart's team leads. So the multi-sensor itself, and I hope I do it justice, Volt. So bear with me. But this is the foundation of our business. When we were originally set up in 2019, it was around data capture and how we could help our clients understand how their assets are used and operated to reduce energy consumption on an advisory basis, but also to help them improve future design. And what we found through our clients is they wanted us to move into energy control to help them realize the benefits. But what the multi-sensor does, and it's quite an innocuous, elegant device that sits in the ceiling. It collects temperature, light, noise, presence, air quality, and humidity data. And from the triangulation and the analysis of those data points, we're able to provide insights on building performance on a real-time basis. We have so many data points because of the amount of data that's sent from the multi-sensor to a gateway and then back to Utopi that we then collect and analyze. And it really is as simple as that. It's those devices that are installed into a property asset that we're then able to use to help our clients manage that environment. So if we move on to data and impact, I think we're okay for time, Chanel, the pace we're going, but I might speed up a little bit. So this is my favorite diagram when I look to explain Utopi to our clients, but also our partners. Ultimately, we go through 4 stages. And I'm a great fan of analogy because of my background. What we do is we implement. When we implement is we enable measurement and control of the devices that are in the room. We're able to measure the temperature. We're able to measure the starting point of CO2. We're able to get an understanding of what's going on in terms of noise and also movement to get a sense of occupancy. And then you can start to control what's going on. So we have the baseline, and then we establish control of that environment. And then from that, we adapt, we learn, and we run the system. And that allows us to then optimize the temperature environment in the room. And it's important to maintain it. So if someone wants their room to be hotter, there is the opportunity for exceptions should you and your facilities management teams choose to do that. But there's turnover in those rooms on the academic year. So it's really important to make sure that we're able to reset and we're able to understand what's actually going on in the room so we can maintain the regime. The step downs that come in, for, say, at weekends, if students go away and they don't reduce the temperature of their devices, we're able to manage that by having a step down after no motion. And when they come back, it'll go back on. There's an overwatch function as well in terms of monitor and sustain those savings. All systems, no matter how hard we try, get creep in them. So making sure that we understand, and the heat map is really useful in this, which rooms are creeping up in temperature, therefore is something going on that we don't quite expect. And then when you've done all of that and you've reduced your environmental footprint and your costs to help with decarbonisation, because you know you have more confidence in the amount of energy that you're consuming and it's at a lower level, should you then move on to decarbonising your assets, you're actually able to do so at a lower cost because you'll need a smaller infrastructure, say a heat pump, than you would if you're running at the higher level of consumption before you installed a Utopi solution. So this enables our clients to take strategic decisions about expenditure and create sustainable solutions. So not solutions that are installed and then gradually tail off over time, but the ongoing service and the platform, the insight you get allows you to maintain those solutions. So we've talked a lot, and we will keep talking about the amount of data that we have, as we're a software company and we are a data analytics company. I won't spend long on this, but what we're able to do is establish a benchmark of energy and building performance based on the data points that we have. And that is split down into the different types of domestic hot water, as well as the different types of heating that apply, because an electrically heated but gas domestic hot water building has a different level of performance to an electrically heated and electric hot water building. So we break down that to be able to analyze it. And we're able to tell you how efficient your assets are against the industry benchmarks that we've discovered. And then from that, you're able to make prioritized decisions around capital expenditure as to which assets would an investment realize the highest benefit in, that you can then apply for, as well as having an assessment of the level of savings that could be delivered. So when we know how efficient the building is, we can then look at the level of savings that, based on the evidence we've got from previous operations, that can be delivered in that building. And no surprise, the hotter the building is, the more that we can save. But that benchmark is proving very valuable to our clients in informing their own investment strategies. And there's quite an easy way to get into that mix, which is Utopi Light, as a product that we've launched, in terms of if you give permission to Utopi via a structured process we have to apply because of GDPR, to share your metadata by giving us access to your metadata, we can then analyze it and we can tell you how efficient the buildings that you have in your portfolio are against other buildings of that time. And we do find that clients find that useful. So what I'm going to do now, very excitedly, is attempt to explain a graph. So if you leave that with me, first of all, I'm going to start with the color of the lines. But for what I want to say is what this shows you is the point, effectively, the impact of the intervention of a Utopi control system. So the line at the red is the average multi-sensor temperature in the room. And so you'll see in this example, at the top graph, in this example, the multi-sensor was in before an energy control solution was activated, and it was in afterwards. And that's the step down you see in the dotted purple line. The blue is the average energy consumption, and you can see how that has dropped, which informs the average purple line. And the green is average external temperature. So that is always something that we look at in terms of the energy that we can save, because obviously if it's warmer, you don't burn as much energy. But that's some of the factors that we look at when we put our solution into place. So what you can see is there's a significant step down of about 5 kilowatt hours per bedroom with the implementation of Utopi controls. And then the bottom graph highlights really what's changed and at a summary level that drove that saving. So the red graph, the red spiky graph, is the number of rooms. Well, it's the average temperature of rooms in the asset. And you'll see there's a high number of them up above 26, 27 degrees. One of the key metrics we look at is what's the percentage of rooms greater than 24 degrees. And then the green line is what's the average temperature. Well, what's the temperature of all the individual rooms. And once the Utopi system has been deployed, and you can see it's moved to the left, and therefore the overall average temperature has reduced, but the number of rooms greater than 24 degrees has also reduced. So that's the impact that we've had, and that drives a reduction in energy savings. And then the next graph, slightly more complicated, so bear with me, but similar story. But this shows, you see there's 2 step downs in here, and also there's a slightly different pattern with the graph at the bottom. So the first point of intervention, although the convention is the same in terms of the color of the line, so I won't go over that again. But the first one, you see the multi-sensor wasn't in place originally because there is no red line at the top. But the first one was an installation of smart panel heaters. So when those heaters were put into the room, the comparison from November to March shows a reduction because those heaters were able to be limited. And there's a second step down that follows, which steps from the left-hand side of the graph is November 23, the right-hand side of the graph is November 24. That shows the implementation of Utopi controls, which was able to drive further benefit over that time by establishing that control environment, because it could talk to the smart panel heater tell it when it needed to turn itself off, tell it when it needs to turn itself on, but also work with the operational team to set those parameters based on student satisfaction when they're in the room, as opposed to students setting at a level that they wanted. And then at the bottom, again, the red is the graph before Utopi was deployed. And then the green one was the deployment of the smart panel heaters. And you'll see there how the graph hasn't moved very far to the left, but the percentage has dropped slightly. When we deploy the Utopi control, it moves to the blue graph, which then moves the average temperature all the way across to the right. So hopefully you can see the two steps. And what it also does is it tightens up that, I'll call it a curve, but it's a spike. It tightens up that curve as well, so that that demonstrates there are more rooms that are controlled, and there's a higher percentage of them. So there's a lot higher percentage of rooms that are better managed, which is what that graph shows you. Chanel.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. So, right, Jonathan's given you a bit of granularity on impact. So we wanted to also offer you some, I guess you could say, low-hanging fruit, some easy wins in terms of what you could take away today and turn into action for your own estate. So we've already mentioned that we've got 38 billion environmental data points, but when we split them into these three categories, I think it makes it so clear how you can move from reactive firefighting in your estates to be proactive, data-driven in your asset performance. So I've split some insights from our data set into three core areas: resident engagement, outlier management, and energy management strategies. Why those three channels? Because we believe those are your quickest, most active channels to driving change and making an impact quickly. Resident engagement, because we've got so many students and residents living in these estates, if we can bring them along on this journey and get them to positively change their behaviours, we can really impact change. Outlier management, it's all about, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, addressing your hottest spaces first and your highest energy consumers first to make an impact. And then you've got energy management strategies. That's all about energy control and about doing that at scale across your estates. So hopefully, as I say, you can take some of these away, but I'm going to take you through some of the low-hanging fruit that we see. So on the resident side, we know that 50% of residents take at least one break a month of a minimum of 2 days. So that, for us, the data tells us it's an immediate route for savings. If all you do is concentrate on enhancing energy controls in those spaces, so you're not heating unoccupied rooms, then you're immediately going to reduce energy consumption and associated costs. On the outlier management side, we know that 76% of the residents that we interviewed or surveyed said that they don't even know the temperature in their room. So for us, that's an immediate route for savings if all you do is concentrate on engaging your residents, on educating them on their heating behaviours. And then again, as I said earlier, putting data in the hands of your residents through things like resident apps and bringing them along on that journey. And then finally, on the energy management side, we know that the average temperature in an unoccupied student accommodation space in the UK is heated to 21.4 degrees Celsius. So again, immediate route for savings if you concentrate on enhancing data strategies or enhancing energy controls and then trying to reduce heating those unoccupied spaces. Right, next slide, please, Jonathan. So we've gone over the low-hanging fruit, the easy wins. I now want to take you through some data stories to bring it to life even further. And again, really reiterate that idea of moving from reactive firefighting to proactive data-driven asset management. So I'm going to take you through three data stories. And I think that those three data stories really pull back to those 5 core areas we mentioned earlier of cost control, student engagement, consumption insights, asset performance, and net zero. So the first one I'm going to take you through is heating empty spaces. We actually say that this is what's hiding in plain sight and something that quality data can really bring to life. So first data story. We had a client heat an unoccupied space for a 36-day period, and that cost them £91. So next slide, please, Jonathan. Let's dig into that data story even more. So our client was using the Utopi platform, and they were alerted to a space that was consuming 10 kilowatt hours a day. Now, for reference here, the average UK home consumes around 8 kilowatt hours a day, and that's considered a home of 2 to 3 bedrooms. So it's quite a significant amount of energy to be consuming in one student accommodation space. So they went along, knocked on the door, realized that there wasn't a student in there, it was unoccupied. They were able to turn the heating off. And that's what you can see in that graph on the bottom right-hand corner, where it drops from 10 kilowatt hours a day to below 1 kilowatt hour a day. Now, you might be thinking in isolation, £91 over 36 days or £505 over a 200-day heating season. That might not seem a huge amount on paper, but they add up. And it's an important data story to tell, because when you're extrapolating that £505 across a maybe 250, 300, 400 bed asset, and you might have 20, 30, 40 unoccupied spaces that are being unnecessarily heated, you can see in the context of cost control where some of those savings can be unlocked, and why that granular room level insight is so important in the higher education sector. Next slide, please, Jonathan. So wasteful behaviours. Next slide again. So we, again, had another client using the Utopi platform, and we have alerts on the platform. So it can actually email you when a space consumes a considerable amount of energy, or perhaps is looking overheated. So we had a client alerted to a space. They found out that it was a wasteful behaviour going on. And when they engaged with that student, they saw an 89% reduction in energy use. So next slide, please, Jonathan. What exactly happened to reduce that 89%? So this, I find this data story really interesting because it's so common in the UK. I mean, I'm based up in Scotland. It's cold all the time. I'm from a much warmer climate, so I understand how these residents can feel. But this is actually just one single plug-in heater, or what we call rogue heaters, an additional heating source. So the resident had been consuming 23.4 kilowatt hours of energy a day. And again, that average UK home is 8 kilowatt hours, which, yes, would have cost them over £1,000 over a heating season. But as you can see, that additional heating source consumes a huge amount of energy. And you can see here again on this bottom right-hand corner graph where the resident was engaged, and that significant drop down to 2.5 kilowatt hours a day. So again, another example of the importance of that granular room level insights, but also the importance of getting that student engagement right. The site team were able to speak to the student about their environmental goals. They were able to teach the resident how to use the smart heating device that was already in their room. And ultimately, this resident decided to give up the plug-in heater and reduce the energy consumption. And then finally, ultimately my favorite data story, entrepreneurial spirit. If we could go to the next slide, please, Jonathan. Thank you. So this one's the shocking one, or the mind-blowing one, I think I mentioned earlier in the session. So we had a client alerted to a space that was consuming 1,200% more energy than the site average. So our customer impact team, so again, Stuart, who's on the call, in this particular instance, they were actually alerted to a space because it was consuming 50 kilowatt hours a day. So next slide, please, Jonathan. This particular data story was Bitcoin mining. Now, I hadn't seen the impact of Bitcoin mining. I knew it was happening, didn't really realize what that would look like from an environmental standpoint. So yes, the space would have cost over £3,000 over a 200-day heating season and over 10,000 kilowatt hours. But I find this particular data story so important, especially in the context of student engagement, because this resident actually didn't agree to completely stop what they were doing. They had a bills included model. They felt like they were doing their bit. So, and I believe they had about 3 or 4 servers running 24/7. What they did agree to do after the site team went and had a chat with them was to not mine for Bitcoin when they weren't in the room. So that was the kind of compromise that they agreed to. And you can see here there was a drop down to a drop of 27 kilowatt hours per day, which is really significant. And it's over 4 times the UK average. But it's such an important data story to showcase that, you know, these kind of entrepreneurial residents can be, you know, there can be multiple in an asset, and it can really affect not only your bottom line, NOI, but also the health and comfort of all of your residents. And to show you the kind of depths of the data that we've got, I mean, we've helped Scotland Police find a missing student with our insights, which is so important in the context of welfare and health and safety. We have found an ironing service being run from a shared kitchen living diner. Our clients were alerted to it on the platform because it was consuming 75% more energy than its neighbouring KLDs. They went along thinking it might have been a faulty fridge. It was not. It was very entrepreneurial residents. And we've also found occupied and unoccupied spaces being heated to well above 30 degrees, whether that be faulty heating devices or residents not really knowing how it works. So they're using the window to regulate the temperature. But hopefully that brings to life the kind of data that we can offer and the kind of value that can offer you. But I'm going to hand back to Jonathan, and then I think we'll kick off the Q&A.
Thanks, Chanel. And I think just one more. I mean, I love these examples. To me, it really brings it home in terms of the value of data. Another thing to mention as well, we do talk a lot about reduction in energy consumption and translate it to cost. There's an important health and safety consideration as well. If someone is using devices in a room that they shouldn't be using, and it alerts you as the manager of that accommodation that those things exist. Stuart's popped in the chat. One of the things I should have mentioned early is one of the things that's great about our retrofit solution is the multi-sensors are battery powered. So we don't have to turn up with loads of cable and be highly disruptive when we install that. We can generally do a room in about 30 minutes, fully fitted, because the multi-sensor is battery powered, and then it talks to the IoT to the heater, which is plugged in, powered in the normal way. I should have mentioned that earlier, which I apologise for. The good news is, though, I'm going to stop talking now, and if we could hand over to some Q&A.
I guess firstly, I'll just say thank you. Lots and lots of information there to take on board, but also really insightful. And I'm sure there's lots of us on the call that can definitely relate to some of those data stories that you gave there, Chanel, of rogue heaters in rooms and people mining bitcoins and servers and all sorts of things going on. So that's great. I do want to kick off, I guess, and start with a question as to whether or not you've had any of your clients contact you around how they would use your data and the information to build things like fair usage policies and things like that within their, I think we all set out to be an all-inclusive rent, whereas as you touched on there, a resident who's not willing to engage in maybe reducing some of their behaviours that are obviously £3,500 on energy in just 200 days when the contract might be far longer than that, and how, with the data you have, would it support some of those fair usage policies that I can see a lot of some providers are looking at the moment.
Yeah, of course. Falk, would you like to take this one, or Stuart?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to, although Stuart is probably the one who speaks to our customers mostly about the fair use policies. So effectively, when it comes to fair use, if you have individually metered rooms and we get the data, then out of those meters, and again, we have retrofit metering solutions that actually help with that and allow for that to happen. Then our platform also has the ability to effectively, monitor consumption against those fair use targets that are set, and highlight, those individual rooms then that perhaps exceed that particular threshold that has been set. Stuart, I don't know if you want to talk a bit more about that from your experience.
Yeah, I mean, the industry's obviously changed a number of years ago. That and the PBSA sector is an all-inclusive rent model, which obviously drives its own challenges within that. There is a perception in the industry that no one wants to go back to splitting utilities and charging that separately. but we have developed in the Utopi platform a fair use model. But like Fogg touched upon there, the challenge that you have in terms of embedding that into your tenancy agreement is that when it comes to clusters, for example, you don't have that. You might not have that granular level, so you might meter at a cluster level, but you're not metering at a bed level. So there are some operators out there that are doing this at the moment. So what they are doing is they're taking that, like you mentioned, they're kind of fair use model, but what they're actually doing is they're taking that data and looking to put it into the hands of the residents and almost kind of gamify it. So we've got a couple of operators at the moment that are using or are taking the environmental data from the Utopi multi-sensor, so things like temperature and air quality. They are coupling that environmental data set with energy consumption, so you can see the correlation between, how warm is my room, what's air quality like, how much energy does that consume, and then incentivizing residents to either cool their rooms down slightly or not have the window open when they're not there, and kind of behave in a certain manner and then reward for that behaviour. Or if residents are actually within sensible parameters in terms of their average daily temperature and how much energy they consume, then reward those residents for staying in those parameters. But I guess back to the kind of fair use model, I think some operators within the industry have tried to enforce it. It's in everybody's tenancy agreement, right? It's kind of standard practice across the board. But it's how do you actually implement something like this and enforce it? I think the challenge there is the granular level data to carry that out. But it doesn't mean to say that you couldn't take some of that data and write to the residents, just to let them know that this kind of behaviour is encouraged and we can see how much data is being used. I think it's dependent. Being able to do this is dependent on how much metering or sub-metering goes on at a bed level, and I also think it will take one operator to potentially bring something like that to the market, and everybody will potentially jump on the bandwagon. It's just that classic model. Everybody's waiting for someone to do it before everybody else tries to implement something similar.
Yeah, thank you. I can see Ross has put some questions in the
Yes, I was going to say,
chat.
Stuart, do you want to take this next one from Ross? He's just asked, is there likely to be better performance results depending on the age of buildings, i.e. are we likely to see better results for newer or versus older stock?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. I'll maybe let Paul talk about the kind of thermodynamics and fabric of buildings. What we do tend to see in more modern buildings is that you tend to have slightly smarter technology, which helps control and drive certain types of behaviour, so mitigate things like overheating, like we've developed in our technology. I think Jonathan touched on this earlier on, is having technology that integrates with each other. So being able to have the Utopi multi-sensor, for example, which detects motion. So rather than just having a heating system that stays on, we can integrate those two systems together where the multi-sensor detects motion. If no one's in the room for an hour or 2 hours, it will step down, for example. And then obviously conserve energy, but then when the resident comes back in, they can interact the data to maximize comfort levels. You tend to see systems like this being built in more modern buildings as standard. What you see in older buildings is slightly older technology. When that technology life cycle expires and that technology needs refresh, then at that point the data and the insights that you get from technology like Utopi will help you understand maybe where you want to make that capex spend and what type of technology you might want to put in there. So it comes back to that, well, what ultimately, if I baseline or benchmark my assets or my portfolio, the question that I want to ask myself is, well, where would I want to target that spend, and in doing so, what would that technology look like? So yeah, modern technology you tend to find in modern builds as a standard. It's not always the case, but it's a kind of general rule of thumb. But it doesn't mean to say that when the time comes to carry out upgrades or retrofits in slightly older assets, that you couldn't retrofit modern technology like this in there.
There's another aspect to this, and that is that having like the multi-sensor in particular, for example, even if you already have either some temperature control capability, or you just want to understand how your building performs, it gives you the unique and granular insights into how your building is actually performing from a baseline point of view. So we had one client, and they said to us anecdotally, "Oh, the windows on the first floor aren't all that great." Okay, and being able to understand heat loss, for example, through this, and also being able to see before and after when it comes to, let's say, for example, in that case, you replace the windows. Does the temperature increase? Does the energy consumption decrease? Where you've actually carried this kind of work out, or even being able to test scenarios if you have 2 or 3 different options that you may want to pursue, that you test them at a smaller scale, but you get, data-driven insights then as to how those are actually performing, rather than relying on, subjective views through
Yeah.
surveys or anything like that. It gives you hard data with which you can make decisions, and that's priceless, really, when
Yeah.
it comes to these scenarios.
Ross, you mentioned there also just around time and disruption. The Utopi multi-sensor is if retrofitted as battery powered, that comes with the battery in it. Our installers can install a multi-sensor in under 2 minutes. It can either be mounted on the ceiling, or there can be a recess cut into the ceiling, and it's inserted in. That would take us 2 minutes. With heating devices or heating control devices, they take slightly longer. Electrical panel heater, for example, the circuit would need to be checked. Power obviously needs to be shut off while that's done. TRV, again, the thermostatic radiator valve on radiators takes roughly the same length of time, maybe half an hour, just to check and calibrate. So the install time is really, really quick, and the disruption to residents is minimum. We leave rooms as we find them, so there's no mess to be cleaned up.
Thanks,
And
Stuart.
And then, sorry,
quite often we have
Ross.
sorry. Quite often we actually have residents still in the space while the work's getting carried out. And sometimes they ask questions, about, oh, what is it you're actually doing, and so on. And some interesting conversations ensue there as well, just, where they then understand perhaps, what's being done, why it's being done, and so on. And having that kind of communication, perhaps in advance of an installation, actually helps just, residents to see that, look, this isn't there to make me colder or less comfortable, but it's actually something that gives me, a level of comfort and control, that I would expect, at the same time as helping, minimize waste.
Sorry, Chanel, I was going to pick up the cost point. But
Yeah,
Ross,
go for it.
If you want.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you. I'm just conscious of time. So I put up the diagram earlier on. There are different solutions that we deploy. So they do charge, they do dictate a different level of capital expenditure. If we bundle up them all up into a room, the range is somewhere between £200 and £250 per bedroom capital expenditure. And then in terms of the SaaS license that we charge, which gives you access to all the operability that we've talked about, that does have a tendency to scale depending on how many beds there are, and it starts at £42 per annum per bedroom.
Fair. Yeah, we are conscious of time, but also, Mary, you're more than welcome to share our email addresses with the members. If anybody else has any other questions, please don't hesitate to send us an email. We'll happily jump on another call or have any conversations, because now we've hit the hour.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely great. Thank you. We will share this sort of recording on our internal members side of the web. And obviously it's got the questions within it. I haven't stopped recording, but I'll also on that section put your email addresses so people can contact you directly after this. But yeah, a massive thank you from us. It's been really, really insightful. And I'm sure lots of us have got lots of questions to take back to our estates teams and facilities management teams. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this today.
Thanks for having us.
No, that's
It's been a
absolutely
pleasure.
great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.
Okay.
Hi, thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.